Hey Shane, so talk to us about Google Ads. How can we utilize this, or what advice, suggestions, or methods can you give us that will help actually attract new patients through Google Ads?
Yeah, Michael. So, with Google Ads, these are great because these are people doing a search, looking for a dentist or a dental service in their community. So you're really looking at, for the most part, pretty serious in-market patients at this point. So with that being said, the number one piece of advice I could give on launching a successful Google Ads campaign is making sure that your targeted campaigns are built out individually. And what I mean by that is, if you're running an emergency campaign, you should be specifically bidding on and targeting the emergency dental terms in the area. So emergency dentist, same day dentist, 24/7 dentist, whatever the case is, having a campaign geared just around emergency dentistry. And then if you're wanting to run just a general patient campaign to build the hygiene side of the practice, then those should be general terms that people look at, such as dentist near me, best dental office, dental cleaning, so on and so forth. So that's the number one thing that I think I've seen in the past is a lot of people try to build one campaign and then bid on like all the different keywords that are dental related. And if anybody who's ran Google Ads knows, it can get really expensive really quick if you do it that way. Google Ads isn't necessarily like running an ad on Facebook or boosting a post on Facebook. This is something that you have to have a really solid strategy in. Otherwise, you're going to blow your budget really quickly and not get any results. So that's number one. I mean, for us, every new client that we take on, we run two campaigns right out the get-go. First is a general campaign. Second is that emergency campaign. And especially for you startups out there listening to this, the emergency campaign is great because a lot of times what we have found is you're going to have some openings in your schedule as a startup. So people come in, they feel that real personalized service that you're able to give them. You get them out of pain, get them taken care of. And then what a lot of our startups have found is many of those patients end up getting put on the hygiene schedule afterwards because they had, such a great experience. So that's something for you startup listeners out there. I would highly recommend right out the gate is launching an emergency campaign. So general campaign being second. Now, one question we get is, all right, when we run these campaigns, what's next? Where are we sending them? Are we sending them to the website? You need to have a dedicated landing page for every ad campaign that you're running when it comes to Google. So if it's an emergency campaign, having an emergency specific landing page that you're sending that traffic. And what makes up a good landing page? First and foremost, the information that the patient's looking for, they shouldn't have to scroll down to get to it when they go to the page. So if you have an offer for a $79 emergency exam, then you need to have that right at the top of the landing page with a call to action button to call now, schedule online, whatever the case is, have the call to action with the offer right there. The next thing you need to make sure that that landing page has is the proper tracking in place. And this is kind of a theme every time I do these interviews with you, Michael, but it's so important in making sure you have call tracking set up so you can know where those patients came from, which ad, which campaign, and whether or not they booked or not. And then also having the proper form tracking too. So if you're collecting that patient's information on that landing page, where maybe they're entering their phone number, or their name, their email address, and what insurance they have, for example, you need to make sure that you have the proper tracking set up for that, because Google ultimately in these ad campaigns is going to look at how people clicked on the ad, what they did when they clicked on the ad, and whether or not they converted. So if you don't have conversion set up properly, it's going to mess up your whole bidding strategy, and you're going to end up never being able to actually dial in a cost per new patient. Ultimately, when you're running an ad, after 3, 4, 5 months of doing that, you want to be able to get to a point where you say, all right, I know if we put $2,000 in ads, we're going to get 10 new patients out of that. And that puts our cost per new patient at $200. So that's where we have to get to. But if we don't have that proper tracking in place, you're not going to ever be able to get to that, because the campaign and Google and the algorithm's not going to know who responded to the ad and who did it. So that's the second thing, landing page and making sure that you have that proper tracking set up there. And then the third thing is come in with a realistic budget. Too many times I'll see practices say, they're in Southern California. I spent, $500 a month in Google ads, but I'm not getting nothing. you're not going to get anything with $500 a month in Google Ads. It's just the nature of that platform. You need to be able to dedicate at least $1,200 a month in Google Ads spend, if not more than that, especially if you're targeting things like implants and higher end procedures. So just going into it with realistic expectations and knowing that it's an investment and there's other people out there bidding for the same keywords. So you have to make yourself stand out one way or another. And that's where good ad copy comes into play, proper tracking. And of course, the landing page is everything when it comes to making sure that those patients actually convert.
Real quick, what does good ad copy look like?
Yeah, so it really is based around a couple of things with Google Ads. One is the keywords that people are actually searching for. So if you get, for example, if somebody searches dentist near me, you would ideally have dentist near me in that ad copy and then something that makes you unique. So maybe that's, we specialize in patients with dental anxieties, or maybe it's something around be seen same week, or maybe it's we're a network with most insurances. So having something that's not just dentist in Fontana and best dentist in Fontana. It's like everybody's going to have that. So whether it's highlighting the number of Google reviews that you have, whether it's the sedation options you have, whether it's the fact that you're in network with most insurances, that is what we call effective copy. And with a Google ad, for any of those people listening who've been into the ads manager themselves, you'll notice that there's different keywords and ad copy that you can write based on what the person searched. And so that's a big thing there, is Google's trying to match up with the keywords that you're specifically targeting with what the person searched, and then trying to mix that into an ad that matches up with what that person searched. So that's the key right there for good ad copy, is making sure that you actually point out something that makes the practice unique and would make you stop and click on it. To follow up with that, Michael, the other thing is always be testing. So there's some key numbers that you need to look at to determine whether or not your Google ad campaign is performing. Certainly clicks is kind of a vanity number, but the big ones are your average cost per click, your click-through rate, and your conversions. So your average cost per click, pretty self-explanatory. How much are we spending in these ads every time someone clicks on the ad? Because that's ultimately how you're being charged. Click-through rate is the percentage of times that someone actually clicked on the ad when it was seen. And so with Google, they typically say, anything above 2 to 3% click-through rate is a healthy click-through rate, meaning, you're targeting the right people, you have engaging ad copy, things like that. But for like an emergency campaign, we recommend having closer to like 25, 30% click-through rate. And then for a general campaign, being closer to 10%. So that's something that you can look at. If you notice like your click-through rate on a Google Ads campaign is under 1%, for example, and then your average cost per click is like $15, then you can look at a few things, but most likely it's probably has to do with either your targeting or the ad copy that you have in place. And then, of course, the final piece of that is conversions. How many people called the practice? How many people submitted a contact form? So then ultimately, like I mentioned, we want to get to a point where we can be pretty predictable and say, all right, we know for every $1,000 we put in, we get this amount of new patients out of it. And that's the key to making sure that you're scaling a campaign responsibly and in a way that's going to give you the best return.
Gotcha. Okay. At the beginning of the episode, you mentioned like a lot of people try to do one campaign and then stuff in a bunch of keywords in that one campaign. Do we do one campaign for each keyword then, or what? How does that look?
No, that's a good question. So think of it in terms of service. So you want to bid for multiple keywords for each campaign, but you want to make sure it's geared around one service. So if we're running a emergency dental campaign, then that's where we would target keywords in that one campaign, such as emergency dentist near me, 24/7 dentist, urgent care dentist, these type of terms, anything that revolves around emergency dentistry. And those would all be keywords that you would bid on in that campaign. What you don't want to do is have one campaign and be bidding on emergency dentistry keywords, dental implant keywords, root canals, all of these, where you kind of throw all the services into one campaign, because ultimately it's too hard to create that many ads that's going to match up with what the person is searching for and for Google to actually show that. So if you're running a specific ad on implants, only bid on implant related keywords. Don't bid on hygiene keywords. If you're running a campaign on clear aligners or orthodontics, don't also bid on implant keywords in that campaign. So making sure it's very service based.
Gotcha. So really niche, like hone in on that specific keyword and then give it what you got kind of thing.
Exactly. Go all in on that one service. And you could have multiple campaigns running at once. You could have 4 campaigns, but each campaign you set its own budget, you set its own targeting. You could run an implant campaign, an emergency campaign, and a general campaign all at the same time. You just want to make sure they're individually built out and not just kind of throwing all the keywords into one basket.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then you mentioned come in with a realistic budget. What's a realistic budget?
So it's not a great answer for this, but it's going to depend where you're at. What I can tell you based on our experience is if you're in, competitive area, Southern California, South Florida, areas like that, I mean, honestly, coming in at a bare minimum of $1,500 a month is probably what you're going to need to spend. In more rural areas, you can get away with somewhere between $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month is kind of a starter. But Michael, we have offices that have $3,500 a month, $4,000 a month that they spend in Google ads, single offices. And there are bigger offices out there that spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily about how much you spend. Certainly that has an impact because if you're paying $10 every time someone clicks on your ad and you have a $50 a day threshold, you're only going to get 5 clicks on your ad a day. Some of that has to do with it, but it's not necessarily the person who has the biggest budget that's going to win in this case. It's going to be making sure you're doing everything that you possibly can to make those clicks count. And that's having the proper landing page set up, having the conversion tracking set up, writing that engaging ad copy we talked about using some of the tips we discussed. So you can be more efficient and kind of be the underdog in the fight and still get some of those patients, but you have to come into it realistically. You can't think if I spend $500 a month in Google ads, I want to get 10 new patients out of that because that's most likely just not realistic.
Gotcha. Awesome. So any final pieces of advice you want to give to our listeners on this?
One final piece of advice I'll give is there's something recently that came out in dentistry in the last 2 to 3 months or so called Google Local Service Ads. And I don't know if anybody's talked about these on here yet or not, but these are ads that used to only be available for like the home service industry. So you're like HVAC companies, heating, air and plumbing, things like that. They opened it up to dentistry. And so right now, what I would do is I would recommend everybody go through the verification process. It's called Google Local Service Ads. You can create an account on there. You have to submit information such as your dental license. There's a few things there that you have to do. But once you do that, you can run Google Local Service Ads, which if you go right now and if you type plumber near me, at the very top, you'll see a few businesses that'll be listed above every ad on the page as the Google review rating. It'll have a phone number. It'll say the business name. And then it will usually have a green circle with like a check mark in it. It says Google guaranteed. So when you submit this information, your office can get this Google guaranteed badge, and then you can start running these local service ads. And a lot of dental practices are starting to pick up on this now, but there's still a lot of people who aren't running them. So it's way less competitive. And the other cool thing about this, Michael, is you only pay per lead with Google Local Service Ads. So they only charge you when somebody actually calls and schedules an appointment. And if they call and they don't schedule an appointment, you can actually dispute it and let Google know that, hey, this person didn't actually schedule, and they won't charge you for that. So Google Local Service Ads, you're going to start hearing more about this. And I wouldn't be surprised, Michael, if we do an episode on those here in the coming months.
Nice. Awesome, Shane. I appreciate your time. And if anyone has further questions, you can definitely find them on the Dental Marketer Society Facebook group, or where can they reach out to you directly?
Yep. They can always, Dental Marketer Facebook group, of course, and crimsonmediagroup.com is the other place that you can reach us and fill out a contact form there. And we also always like to help our friend Michael out, do a free marketing analysis for any of the listeners of this podcast. So if you want to do a marketing analysis, us give you some data feedback, you'll go to crimsonmediagroup.com and we'll help you out.
Awesome. So Shane, thank you so much for being with me on this Monday morning marketing episode.
Thanks, Michael.